Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to do an AAR on the strategic surprise scenario from NATO, The Cold War Goes Hot. In this scenario, the Warsaw Pact forces are going to launch a surprise attack against NATO, giving them very little time to respond. NATO first gets wind of the attack 72 hours prior to the invasion. They don't take it seriously for the first 48 hours, and then finally, with 24 hours to go, they see the blitz up to the border by the Warsaw Pact forces, and that's when they decide to respond. And how this is modeled in this scenario is, as you can see here, this is the setup. This is how all of the counters will be on the board at the beginning. You see the overall look here, and then we're going to take a closer look at the border. And you can see not everybody's ready for an attack from either side. They're just kind of hanging out. This is a 14-turn scenario, and how you get to the invasion positions is all done during game turn 0. This is just going to be pre-positioning. After that, you get into the regular game turns, and you have the invasion. For game turn 0, the Warsaw Pact is going to move all their forces up to the border, and they're going to do that using march movement, so that way they can move at double their movement speed. So you're going to get a good line along the border for the Warsaw Pact forces. Now, the NATO force is going to respond a little differently. What you do is you're going to roll a die, and then you are going to compare the die roll versus the movement factor for each of the nations. So say your nation has a die roll of 4. If you roll a 3, you're only going to be able to move 3 hexes towards the border. If you roll 4, then you get to roll 4. But it gives variability, and you're going to have kind of an accordion effect, as some units will get up there much more closer right up to the border, and others will be hanging back a little bit. And we're going to take a look first at the north by Hamburg. You have the border there of Baltap and Northag, and you've got West German forces. You got a U.S. force kind of tucked in the middle there, and then you see the Soviet forces and East German forces arrayed along the border. That's the orange line there. And we look at it now from the Warsaw Pact side. You can see everyone's up on the border pretty good. There's only a couple of gaps. One is right in front of the U.S. unit, and then the other is to the south of Braunschweig. And that's going to actually come into play because Braunschweig is going to fall pretty quickly. That is one of the key cities for NATO as far as scoring here in this scenario. You can get these GDP points, which we'll explain when we get into game turn 1. But we'll continue to look down the line and see how the forces were arrayed before the invasion. And we take a better look at Braunschweig. We have the gap there in 3214. That's going to open it up to 3115. The Soviets can come across that on their attack because they're going to move first. Just like you have that gap right in front of the American forces at 2614. Now we'll take a look at the Northag-Centag border, and you can see the British forces are not able to get all the way up to the border, nor were the West Germans. Belgians are lagging a little bit behind too. We do have some West German forces that were able to get up there, but they're strung out. They're really not that tight. They have a couple of gaps right there, 3517, 3717, and remember, the Zocs here do not stop movement. You can move your forces through if you've got the movement points to get through. So you can actually punch holes real quick right here, and that's another thing that NATO forces have to be concerned about. And the only thing standing between Kassel and the East Germans right there on the border are the 2nd Panzer Grenadiers. And on the southern portion of this line right here, you've got a good amount of U.S. forces with some West German 3 Corps also mixed in there with the U.S. 5th Corps. So they've got a good mix on the line right there. And that's a key position too, because the Rhine is only 90 miles away from the border at that point. That's the closest point to the Rhine, right behind Frankfurt. So the U.S. definitely wants to make sure they put up a stern defense right there. And we were talking about where the West Germans were, how they got up to the border real quick was because of their pre-positioned spots. They were closer to the border. They only had to move a few hexes in. They were able to move 3 hexes, 45 miles in total, which got them up to the border there. However, you can see here in the Centag-Northag border, they weren't able to get that close because of where they started from. Same for the British. They were also able to only move 45 miles. They're anywhere from 15 to 75 miles away from the border, so they're still a little bit behind. They're going to have to try to get up there quickly at the first turn after the Soviets move. And U.S. 5th Corps, they're really strongly arrayed down the south like we were talking about. You can see here, the only danger is, and which is something I risked here as wearing the NATO hat, is I did stack here in this first turn. And this is something that can be dangerous, and you'll see how that turns out, because Warsaw Pact will be able to launch their airstrikes first, and they're going to get a good amount of airstrikes in the first turn or two because they're getting that extra surprise. And those airstrikes can be deadly. So that's something you want to keep in mind when playing this game. You want to move your guys up there. You want to make sure that your forces are able to support each other, but at the same time, you want to make sure you don't stack all the time, because you can attack up to 2 steps in a hex, and a lot of these units are 1-step units, so one airstrike can attack both units in the hex. Now we'll go a little bit further south to the Czech border outside Nuremberg. You see the U.S. 5th Corps, U.S. 7th Corps. 5th Corps is going to continue to move towards the border around 4315, 4215, and the 7th Corps is going to continue to move towards 4410, the Czech border, trying to link up with the West German forces there. And you can see there the U.S. 7th headquarters is about 75 miles away from their units. U.S. 5th Corps is mixed in with them. They're heading towards the border, and U.S. 7th Corps headquarters is trying to get out past Nuremberg. So they got about 5 hexes to traverse. They've only got a 3 hex supply range, so they're going to try to beat feet up there as quickly as possible. And we have the West German 2nd Corps, which is outside Stuttgart. They're trying to get up to the Czech border as well. And along the Czech border, we have 1st Armored for the U.S., 4th Panzer Grenadiers for the West Germans arrayed along the border there. So they really are not in position to give up a good defense or even to go on the attack, because if you attack into Czechoslovakia and take Prague, that will take the Czechs out of the game. So NATO is going to want to get up to that line pretty quick. And the Dutch are also trying to hurry up. They're trying to get up to that line, but they were only able to move a few hexes, and they're way behind everybody. So they're going to be follow-on forces to make a secondary line as well. And that is the final starting positions for everyone here at the end of game turn 0 before we started kicking off the invasion in game turn 1.